আসসালামু আলাইকুম রহমতুল্লাহ। শুকরিয়া জ্ঞাপন করছি মহান আল্লাহ রাব্বুল আলমিনের কাছে। দুরুদ ও সালাম পেশ করছি বিশ্ব মানবতার মুক্তির দূত রাসূল করিম সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লামের প্রতি। সুপ্রিয় দর্শক, কাছে বা দূরে, দেশে বা প্রবাসে, যে যেখানে বসে আমাদের আজকের অনুষ্ঠান দেখছেন, সবাইকে জানাচ্ছি আন্তরিক প্রীতি ও মোবারকবাদ। এন মোহাম্মদ প্লাস্টিক নিবেদিত মহিলা স্কলারদের নিয়ে বিশেষ আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান ইসলাম ও নারীতে বরাবরের মতোই সাথে রয়েছি আমি কামরুন্নাহার মুক্তা, এবং আমাদের সাথে সুদূর আমেরিকা থেকে যুক্ত হচ্ছেন অনলাইনে ডক্টর রাউদা মোহাম্মদ ইউনুস, পোস্ট ডক্টরাল ফেলো, মেডিকেল কলেজ অফ উইসকনসিন, USA। এবং আমাদের আজকের আলোচনার বিষয় ফাস্টিং অ্যাজ এ স্টেপ টুয়ার্ডস তাকওয়া। প্রিয় দর্শক, চলুন আমরা চলে যাই আমাদের আজকের অতিথির কাছে।
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. So before I start, I would like to first of all praise Allah for His kindness and mercy that we are able to experience Ramadan one more time. And as you know, this is a very special month for Muslims worldwide, wherever you are, in whatever condition you are in. And all of us know that many people, in fact, do not have the chance to experience Ramadan again this year. So this is a privilege that we should take advantage of. So my talk today, inshallah, will be on taqwa and fasting. And I would love to maybe take all of you along a very short journey with me on how, inshallah, fasting can relate to or lead to taqwa. I will first start with a story, and I'm quite sure many of you have heard of this story before. It is a story of how Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab, one day when he was the caliph, when he was the khalifa of, or we call it the Amir al-Mu'mineen, he was walking around, I think at night, to take care of the affairs of the Muslim Ummah at that time. And he passed through a house where he overheard a conversation between a mother and a daughter. So as you all might already know the story, so basically there was a poor family and the mother was selling milk to earn a living. And the mom was telling the daughter to add water into milk to increase the amount so that they could make more money. And when the daughter heard that, she was very upset, and she stopped her mom and advised her and said that this is not right and you should not be mixing milk with water, even if we are in a difficult position, even if we don't have money, and even if by doing that we can make more money. The mother then said that, why are you so worried? Like, the Khalif is not here. He doesn't see what we're doing. And the daughter said, well, yes, the Khalif doesn't see, but Allah is there and Allah sees whatever that we do. This is a story that basically describes how taqwa is and what the effect of taqwa is in our heart and our action in our daily life. So I'll start first with basically defining taqwa. What is taqwa? So we have two types of definition here. The first one is the literal meaning of taqwa. Taqwa linguistically comes from the word waqa, or some people say wiqaya, which means prevention. So waqa means to protect yourself against something or to prevent yourself from getting into something. Conceptually, taqwa means the fear of Allah, right? But this fear is not the simple fear that we understand it. Because if I just say that taqwa is fear of Allah, that doesn't do justice to the word, because that would exclude the other components of taqwa, which is love and respect for Allah. So when we say that taqwa means fear of Allah, it also means that we fear to disobey Allah because we fear His punishment. Okay, that's the first level. But the higher level of taqwa is also that we fear displeasing Allah out of love and respect. So that means basically we fear that we will make Allah displeased or unhappy because we love Him so much and because of our respect for Him. So maybe just a simple example, and I know that of course we cannot ascribe any example to Allah because Allah is unique and different, but I'm just trying to make it easy for us to understand that when two people love each other, for instance, right, maybe a couple, husband and wife, when they're so in love with each other, naturally they would be very careful about the other person, right? The wife, for example, would always try to remember, oh, my husband doesn't like this, my husband loves this, and the same goes with the husband, right? And then they will always try to remember when is the person's birthday, when is the spouse's anniversary, for instance, because of that love, it creates a sense of fear of displeasing the other person. So the same here goes to our relationship with Allah. But of course, as I said, we cannot ascribe Allah, or we cannot use Allah for any kind of example, because it's not the same, but it's just to make us understand. So that was the first conceptual meaning of taqwa, which is fear of Allah. And as I said, it is fear to displease Allah out of our love and respect for Him. Now, the second conceptual meaning of taqwa is God consciousness. And I'm pretty sure many of you have already come across this term. But what I actually mean here is that we are always mindful of Allah's presence in our lives. So when I say the word conscious, that means you're always thinking about something and you're always aware of something. It's always there in your mind. Now, the term God consciousness, or the fact that you're always mindful of Allah, is that it affects your action, it affects your thoughts, it affects your senses, and it affects whatever that you do in your everyday life. So this means you're conscious of Allah in whatever that you look at, you're conscious of Allah in whatever you do, you're conscious of Allah of whatever that your hand takes, you're conscious of Allah of whatever you hear or you listen to, you're conscious of Allah of who you mix with, and so on and so forth. Now, Umar al-Khattab, again, Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab once describes taqwa as a person who is going through a narrow path full of thorns while he tries to protect himself and his clothes from getting hurt. So you can imagine if you walk through a very narrow path and there are thorns all around you, and you have to make sure that you don't get hurt or your clothes don't get entangled with those thorns, what would you do? You will be very careful. You will always look around right and left, and you will walk very slowly to make sure that you don't get hurt. Now, the cloth here can be, may reflect your character, your faith, or your iman that you're trying to protect. And the thorns here reflect the temptations in life that you're going to encounter on a regular basis. What are the temptations of life that we always experience? Money, right? Wealth. It could be fame. It could be power. It could be haram relationships, and many more. So this is what you do when you have taqwa. And just to, before I go to the second part, maybe I'll just summarize that taqwa has two types of meaning, literal meaning and conceptual meaning. And conceptually, you can say it's fear of Allah and God consciousness.
সুপ্রিয় দর্শক, আপনারা দেখছেন এন মোহাম্মদ প্লাস্টিক নিবেদিত পবিত্র মাহে রমাদানের নিয়মিত আয়োজন ইসলাম ও নারী অনুষ্ঠান। সময় হলো ছোট্ট একটি বিরতির, আমাদের সাথেই থাকুন। প্রিয় দর্শক, বিরতির পর আপনাদের আবারও স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি এন মোহাম্মদ প্লাস্টিক নিবেদিত পবিত্র মাহে রমাদান উপলক্ষে মহিলা স্কলারদের নিয়ে বিশেষ আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান ইসলাম ও নারীতে। আমাদের সাথে অনলাইনে সুদূর মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্র থেকে যুক্ত আছেন ডক্টর রাউদা মোহাম্মদ ইউনুস, এবং আমাদের আজকের আলোচনার বিষয় ফাস্টিং অ্যাজ এ স্টেপ টুয়ার্ডস তাকওয়া।
Now the second part of this talk that I want to emphasize is the relationship between fasting and taqwa. Now, if we look at the verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 183, when Allah talks about fasting, right, siyam, Allah mentions that eventually the final goal is taqwa. So the verse says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyamu kama kutiba alal ladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O you who believe, so Allah calls out to the believers, to those who believe in Allah, fasting has been prescribed upon you the way it was prescribed upon the people before you, so that you may attain taqwa. So in this verse, it's very explicit, right? Allah says it clearly that the reason why He prescribes fasting is so that you attain taqwa. So now then you might wonder, how does it work? How is it that when I fast, I become someone with higher God consciousness, or I become someone with a higher level of taqwa? Now, in order for us to understand that, let's look first at the meaning of fasting. So most people, when we say fast, right, siyam, we understand it as not eating and drinking. Okay, we understand it as waking early in the morning, have your sihri, and then you fast the whole day, you don't eat, you don't drink, and then when Maghrib comes, you happily just start eating, okay? So that is not wrong, okay? But that is also not the whole meaning of fasting. Now, fasting literally means to restrain yourself, right? To stop yourself from doing something. And yes, when we fast, we restrain ourselves first and foremost from food and drinks, right? But fasting actually also means restraining yourself from everything that displeases Allah. So it's just not just food and drinks, but also anything that you know will not be noble enough, right, for someone who fasts to do. Now, I'll give you one hadith in Sahih Muslim where Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said, the Messenger of Allah, Rasulullah, peace and blessings be upon him, once said that when one of you wakes up in the morning for fasting, then he or she should not use obscene language, should not behave foolishly in a foolish manner, and if anyone abuses him or argues with him or start a fight with him, this person should say 2 times, indeed, I am fasting. And in Arabic, it says, inni sa'im. Okay, so what this hadith basically is telling you is that when you fast, right, you should also restrain yourself from all sorts of bad behavior. Don't use bad language. Don't behave in a foolish manner. So, of course, foolish manner means to engage with anything which is not decent, and also to restrain yourself from arguing and fighting. Now, I know this may sound small, but let's all be honest that every day in our lives, whether we fast or not, we always encounter situations when it's so difficult for us to restrain ourselves from talking back. When someone shouts at us, for example, we always want to react. And even with our family members, sometimes we get into argument. So this is actually the time for us to practice and to always remember that I am fasting, inni sa'im. Therefore, it's not just food and drinks, but also I'll restrain myself from doing anything else that Allah will not be pleased with. Now, there are several ways that I would want to emphasize on how when you fast in a true sense, that will help you achieve taqwa. Now, first of all, naturally, human beings, when they are in a difficult situation, it's easier for them to remember Allah compared to when they're in a very easy and comfortable situation. And I'm sure many of you will agree with me on this. So when we fast, the first thing that happens to us is that we feel hungry, right? We experience hunger and thirst, and it makes our body weak. So this is actually an advantage because human beings, when they experience hunger and weakness, they become vulnerable. And this vulnerable creates a sense of need for something greater than them. And this is when it's a lot easier for us to be mindful of Allah because we feel a sense of weakness and vulnerability within us. And it reminds us of how weak we are without Allah. So that creates a conducive situation for you to remember Allah and be mindful of Him. My second point is that when we fast, right, in Ramadan, we commit ourselves to a set of rules, right? I cannot eat this, I cannot drink from this time to that time. I'm supposed to wake up early. And when I break my fast, I start with dates, for example, and then I do tarawih. So there is a set of rules that guide our lives step by step throughout the whole month of Ramadan. And all these rules govern our actions and our senses. It is a kind of practice for us. It is also actually a struggle for us, right? Because when you commit yourself to a set of rules, you are basically saying no to your own desire, right? I want to do this, but no, the rule says otherwise. Therefore, I have to respect the rule. So this struggle, or I would say jihadun nafs, right? Struggle against your desire and self is the core ingredient of taqwa, because someone cannot achieve or attain taqwa without jihadun nafs, without the ability to struggle against your own desire. The third point is that when we fast, to some extent, or I would say to a great extent, we actually taste and experience the pain of hunger, the suffering of many people out there who have always maybe been deprived of food and all the luxuries of this life that we have not experienced otherwise. Outside of Ramadan, we rarely think of other people. Sometimes because we have an easy life, for example, we have always abundance of food in the house. It doesn't really come to our mind that other people actually struggle every day just to put food on their table. So through fasting, we experience the pain and suffering of others. And that creates a sense of empathy, a sense of sympathy in your heart for other people. When this sympathy and empathy gets into your heart, automatically it takes away the selfishness and self-centeredness in yourself. And this is actually a cure, a heal to many diseases in our heart. For instance, greed, right? For instance, love of excessiveness, love of food, love of enjoyment and all that. So when your heart is cured of all these diseases, because you are starting to think of others, you're starting to understand the pain and suffering of other people, you will become a more grateful person. And this creates a sense of gratefulness or shukr in your heart.
প্রিয় দর্শক, আপনারা দেখছেন এন মোহাম্মদ প্লাস্টিক নিবেদিত পবিত্র মাহে রমাদানের নিয়মিত আয়োজন ইসলাম ও নারী। সময় হলো আরও একটি ছোট্ট বিরতির, আমাদের সাথেই থাকুন। প্রিয় দর্শক, বিরতির পর আপনাদের আবারও স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি এন মোহাম্মদ প্লাস্টিক নিবেদিত মহিলা স্কলারদের নিয়ে বিশেষ আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান ইসলাম ও নারীতে। আমাদের আজকের আলোচনার বিষয় ফাস্টিং অ্যাজ এ স্টেপ টুয়ার্ডস তাকওয়া। এই বিষয়ে আলোচনা করছেন ডক্টর রাউদা মোহাম্মদ ইউনুস, মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্র।
So now I will wrap up my talk and I'll conclude what I have been presenting to all of you. If you remember, we start with a short story of how taqwa manifests in our life. And this was the story of Umar al-Khattab, Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab, over here in the conversation between the mom and the daughter about not cheating when you're doing business. And we could see the level of taqwa that the daughter has. And she was advising her mother not to do that, even though she knows that that could bring them more money. And she was emphasizing the fact that even if Khalifa Umar does not see us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. And that is something that we should cultivate in ourselves, this belief and strong conviction that whatever we do, Allah is there to watch us. The second part that I talked about was the definition of taqwa. And we talked about the literal meaning, the conceptual meaning, and that taqwa has two meanings conceptually, which is fear of Allah and God consciousness. And how Umar al-Khattab described taqwa as someone who goes through a narrow path with full of thorns around him, and he tries to be extremely careful. So this extreme care and caution is actually what taqwa is in your life. The third part I mentioned was on the relationship between fasting and taqwa. And just to recap briefly, I talked about how when Allah mentions fasting in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 183, he mentions clearly that the final goal of fasting is actually taqwa. And how when we fast, it leads to taqwa is because hunger and thirst creates a sense of neediness and vulnerability within us, and that makes us easier to remember Allah. And second, we commit ourselves to a set of rules, and this is a kind of jihadun nafs, or struggle against our desire. And struggle against your desire is an ingredient of taqwa. And then the third one is that when we fast, we experience the pain and suffering of other people, and this creates sympathy and empathy in our heart. It removes the diseases of heart, such as selfishness, and this eventually makes you a more grateful person. So before I end this talk, I would like to call all of you, and I will start with myself first, inshallah, hopefully, that let's make taqwa our goal for Ramadan this year, and always put in mind that this is what I want to achieve by the end of this Ramadan. So if my level of taqwa is this bit now, so inshallah, let's hope that it will go up after Ramadan. And as we go through along this journey, do not despair when you fall back or stumble, because we are all humans and we make mistakes. And Allah gives us one whole month to practice and keep trying. The last part is probably for us to be consistent after Ramadan as much as we can, because as all of us know, we tend to be very enthusiastic in Ramadan, and right after that, we kind of forget everything. So this is not a good practice, and let's try to be consistent as much as we can. Whatever that we are doing in Ramadan, we try to continue doing it beyond Ramadan. So may Allah grant us Ramadan, inshallah, and blesses us and accept all that we do for Him, and may Allah reward us immensely. And thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম ওয়া রাহমাতুল্লাহ। সুপ্রিয় দর্শক, আপনারা দেখছিলেন এন মোহাম্মদ প্লাস্টিক নিবেদিত পবিত্র মাহে রমাদানের নিয়মিত আয়োজন ইসলাম ও নারী। আমরা আমাদের আজকের অনুষ্ঠানের একেবারেই শেষ পর্যায়ে পৌঁছে গেছি। সবার প্রতি নিরন্তর শুভকামনা এবং আন্তরিক ধন্যবাদ জানিয়ে আজকের অনুষ্ঠান এখানেই শেষ করছি। সবাই ভালো থাকবেন, সুস্থ থাকবেন এবং কল্যাণের পথে থাকবেন। আল্লাহ হাফেজ। আসসালামু আলাইকুম রহমতুল্লাহ।